Hello and welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Amy Fadool alongside the man, the myth, the legend that is Noah Levick. There is no offseason for Noah because he continues to work all the time. That's what we do here. It is a lot going on. Noah, we've now heard from most of the players, a lot of them after Game 6, and then anybody that didn't talk after Game 6, you heard them the next day at the complex over there with the Sixers in Camden. But most importantly, hearing from Daryl Morey. And I'm going to get your takeaways on it. Was it surprising to you? Because it kind of surprised me that he actually mentioned some players by name. And for people that are wondering, why he didn't say like, oh, we're going to go get X, Y, and Z. They can't do that. But you can talk about players that were on your roster this past year. But he mentioned names.
Yeah, there was more specificity than we're used to from Daryl Morey. I think he's well accustomed to saying a lot without saying very much in these circumstances for strategic purposes. But I think he made it pretty clear that he doesn't agree with the point of view that the Sixers should be somewhat reluctant to pursue star talent that's going to cost a lot of money, to pursue players who are of a certain age, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, even asked for the team's biggest need. He named a specific position. He said, we need a wing who can play at a high level in the postseason, because of course the Sixers feel very good about their lead guard and their starting center. But I think he was also candid about, look, change is inevitable here. Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey are our core. We think Nick Nurse is a great coach. And outside of that, we got to keep all options open. Of course, the Sixers very intentionally structured things that way so that there would be maximum flexibility this offseason. And I think Daryl Morey understood that welcomed a lot of pressure on him. And it's a big offseason. He said as much. And I think, it was interesting, though, that he didn't just take the stance of, well, we could do anything. We'll see what comes to us and we'll make the best decisions we can. It was, look, like star players are ultimately still really impactful in this league. And essentially, if there's an avenue that we feel is sensible to attain another star next to Embiid and Maxey, we're sure going to pursue that. So, I think it was not saying, here's everything that we're talking about privately, and we don't care if the rest of the league knows it. But I agree, definitely a little more transparency than you're accustomed to in those sort of settings.
Yeah, I agree with you. That I don't think it wasn't like he was tipping his hand. I don't think you have to look at the Sixers roster and it's not a real bold statement to say we need a wing who can, perform in the playoffs. That was the one that stuck out to me, certainly because it was very specific to him adding that caveat, like who can perform in the playoffs. Like that's what they're going. They're not building a team. They're not looking for a team that's going to, hey, we're have a pretty good regular season. They're fine with what they've been doing in the regular season, barring injury, and they want to make sure that they can make a playoff run. That's where he knows. He mentioned Buddy Hield, and the question was asked about the fit with Buddy Hield, and he used that word fit probably 9 times at least, it felt like. And I think that's very important because you're going forward and how the Sixers are going to operate. I think that tells you a lot. They're going to look for the best players, but they're also going to look for the best players that fit. That's what that kind of told me. It's very important. You've got to have them fit alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And Nick Nurse's job is to make those guys fit. So I think that that's kind of a twofold thing. But to mention Buddy Hield was interesting because he said, listen, it didn't work as well as I thought it was going to. There's a lot of reasons behind that. I thought he didn't name those, but the reasons are, Joel Embiid was injured, and then you're operating with Buddy Hield and no Joel Embiid. That was the big pull. Like, what would it look like with Buddy Hield getting so much open space and a guy that's your floor spacer? And then Kyle Lowry comes in, and Buddy Hield doesn't start anymore, and he's kind of out of the. And then the playoffs happen, and he's completely out of the rotation, pretty much, save first half of Game 6 or second quarter, and then the fourth quarter. So when you're looking at the players that they might re-sign from this roster, because he mentioned Buddy Hield, did that move your needle at all for you, Noah, on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question because I think it was the main move he made at this deadline is Buddy Hield, and he was really high about the notion that Buddy Hield could be a great fit next to the Sixers All-Stars. So I think Honestly, I wouldn't have been shocked if his response to that was essentially it was a really small sample size next to Joel Embiid. It was 5 regular season games, 1 play-in game, and then boom, Buddy Hield's in his first postseason. So if Morey had taken the stance to some extent of it's just not enough games for us to really get a great handle on that, but we think Buddy Hield's a great player and will handle free agency, however it makes sense to us, something vague like that, I wouldn't have been too shocked. But yeah, he said, when Joel Embiid was back in the lineup for us, we expected more open shots would come Buddy Hield's way, and that just wasn't the case outside of Game 6, where he said Nick Nurse made the right decision to reinsert Buddy Hield, and Hield, of course, showed what he could do, went off, explosive shooting, put 6 threes in, and I think definitely had a nice personal end to his season. But yeah, it wasn't, the bland answer he could have given in that situation. And I think it does indicate that Buddy Hield, there's going to be a price that the Sixers are not willing to go above, of course. And I think that's broadly true of everyone, but certainly with a player like Kelly Oubre Jr., who I think exceeded expectations here, you wouldn't be surprised if the Sixers have a little more willingness to pay slightly more in order to retain Kelly Oubre. I think Campaign was another guy who did well second half of this season. Kyle Lowry, Nico Batum. There are a bunch of role players who I think, to Morey's credit, stepped in to tough, ever-changing circumstances and played pretty well. But I think certainly notable that Buddy Hield, the main guy who they placed a decent amount of hope on as far as providing shooting and scoring next to their stars, wasn't what Morey envisioned, and therefore not impossible by any means that he returns, but definitely sounds like there's going to be a price for Buddy Hield, and the Sixers are not going to be that team that throws tons and tons of money at Hield in order to keep him in Philly.
Yeah, I think they probably feel like, all right, a guy like that can maybe come in here, and depending on what the price is. You hear all the flowery words after the Game 6 loss. And Kelly Oubre was asked about it, as was Buddy Hield, guys that came in here, and obviously they're free agents now, and they want to stay here. They liked it here. Kelly Oubre is an interesting player because he was offered, a decent contract to stay with the Charlotte Hornets. He declined that. There wasn't a lot of takers out there for his services, and I think that, and he spoke on this number of times during the year, the kind of warning sign with him is that, is he just a good player on a bad team? Can he be on a winning team? So he took the veteran minimum, basically $2 million to come here for 1 year, performed quite well, very well at times, but ended the season on a tremendous tear. The last basically 6 weeks just really showed that he could be a winning player on a winning team. Playoff wise, I thought he had a decent playoffs. Sometimes his defense, I thought, bled into the offense. Like, he played great defense at times on Jalen Brunson, and that maybe affected his offense, but he showed that he can score. He had 19 points in one of the games against the Knicks. So that's a guy that I think a lot of people are going to look at to bring back. Fit alongside, you've seen it. You don't need to guess what his fit's going to be. You know what it's going to be. Looking at that, if they decide to go and run it back with Oubre, what do you think that contract looks like? Because he was here on such a deal, but someone might offer him something, because that's the thing. Like, when people are like, oh, we saw it, so did 29 other teams.
Right. It's not a secret anymore. And yeah, for the Sixers, it's all contingent on, okay, do they indeed land the third big star at a max or near max sort of price? Well, then that's going to be really limiting as far as what you're able to surround those guys with. But yeah, for me, Kelly Oubre Jr. is way above a minimum level player, and it's not a secret anymore, as you said. It's really fascinating too, because as he noted, he's currently representing himself. He doesn't have an agent besides himself, so he's got his own thoughts as far as what he wants his future to entail. I don't think he wants to be undervalued, but he certainly had a great first year in Philadelphia. I think he enjoys this locker room, gets along well with the core pieces here, both on and off the court. And I think Nick Nurse, he said he's the best coach I've ever had. He pushes me, and I think we saw some of the byproduct of that late in the year where Kelly Oubre Jr. looked like a really well-rounded player and showed, playmaking flashes and gave a lot of gritty defensive effort. So, yeah, I think on the court, it feels like both sides absolutely adore each other and want this to remain a union, that's prosperous moving forward. But like anything, I don't think Oubre is a player where, say, the Sixers do get a third max guy and it's necessary to pay him some price that is just unequivocally outrageous, that the Sixers would say, sure, we'll do that. That they've got to keep the big picture in mind. But yeah, I think no question, like he deserves a hefty pay raise. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And I also don't know exactly what he's going to look for as far as, does he want a decent term on his deal? Does he want some more stability? And yeah, what kind of offers is he going to have from around the league? But I think deservedly so, there's going to be interest in him. And the Sixers, I think, seem hopeful that everything will work out and it'll be possible to bring him back. I think that would be a really intuitive move and definitely would be a nice, I think, way to just have some sense of stability and continuity, which, of course, is not really going to be here regardless. But to have a core member of the team back from this year that Embiid and Maxey are familiar with, I think that would be a plus.
Yeah, continuity. Joel Embiid, Game 6, the loss, one of the first things out of his mouth, and like what, looking forward. And he's been here long enough now. And we were going on 10 years of Joel Embiid. And continuity is something they've never had for a myriad of different reasons. You can, enumerate them as you want. It's hard to have it when you've got a blank slate, but that would be one way to have it. And you look around the teams that do have the continuity and that are having success right now, they built it through the draft. So you can't, that ship has sailed. There are ways to ensure that you have it at least a bit going forward. And I think that Joel Embiid wants that in any way that he can get it, even if it's for 3 years. Try to have some kind of semblance of the same couple of guys around him. He knows he's going to have Tyrese Maxey. That's a contract that the Sixers are going to be working on. They talk about Tyrese Maxey. I think that there's no worry there. But I thought it was interesting. He came out. That's what he wants. These guys see what happens around the league. They see the teams that are winning. They know what it takes. We're going to take a quick time out to recognize some of our sponsors. But I want to talk to Noah about something he mentioned earlier because it brought up something. The pressure that might be on Daryl Morey, given the fact that it's a completely clean slate almost that he's going with. So we're going to talk about that coming up. But let's pay some bills, as Danny Palmels likes to say. We do want to tell you about this wonderful place, Wilmington University. Find your higher education home at Wilmington University, where your academic success is celebrated by a caring community. Explore your opportunities at wilmu.edu. Celebrity cook Steve Materano brings his Italian-American cooking back home here to Philadelphia. Enjoy Materano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations for Materano's Prime on Open Table. So that's the thing. I mean, when you're looking at it, he's got Nick Nurse, he's got Tyrese Maxey, and he's got Joel Embiid. Tyrese Maxey, they're going to offer the max contract. I don't think that that's a big secret out there. They're going to try to get him under as many years as they can because he is on the ascension right now as the most improved player in the league. Nick Nurse, they believe in. They committed a number of years to him, obviously just finishing up his first year, and Joel Embiid, we all know. Beyond that, you're looking at like 55, 58, whatever it is, $1 million that you can spend. How much pressure is on Daryl Morey right now to get this right? Because I don't know if I've ever seen a team, certainly not a Sixers team, but a team have this much open cap space and open roster spots. Basically, the entire team saved 2 people. I mean, everybody, the bench and guys that are all the way down the bench. There's no one left over except for one guy. So how much pressure does that put on Daryl Morey?
Yeah, I think he knows. I think he knows there's a sizable chunk of pressure on him. He did also mention Paul Reed and Ricky Council IV, but neither of those guys have guaranteed contracts, so I don't think they're written down there in permanent marker quite the way the others are. And I think also notable that Morey didn't really seem to be aligned with Embiid's point of view on the whole continuity concept. He said, well, like there's no blueprint, there's no formula that works for every team. And I can cite examples of teams that had a bunch of changes the year before winning the title. He mentioned the Milwaukee Bucks. They changed a bunch of things about their roster, as far as their role players and their schemes. And then that ended up with them winning a title. So he said, ultimately, like, you just need to have top end talent, and you need to have an identity and a coach and, all these sort of intangible components that enables that top end talent to beat everyone and win an NBA title. Of course, you also need better luck. You need better health, and Sixers haven't been exactly blessed in those departments either. But yeah, I think for Daryl Morey, like, he's highly regarded for good reason. He's built a bunch of teams that have won 50 plus games, but also, like, he's still really hungry for that NBA title, and he recognizes, like, Joel Embiid is an all-time great player. Tyrese Maxey has exceeded his expectations as far as making that all-star leap and seeming capable of even more in the years ahead. So, like, the core of this team is fantastic, and Morey knows it's incumbent on him to do a better job building around those core pieces. I mean, look, he acknowledged the primary deadline acquisition this year, Buddy Hield, wasn't what the Sixers hoped. Last year, Jalen McDaniels wasn't what the Sixers hoped. He was out of that rotation in round 2 of the postseason. George Hill trade, didn't end up panning out how the Sixers wanted. So I think Morey's deadlines haven't been very successful. He's made some savvy, positive, impactful moves otherwise, but moving forward, he needs to nail a lot of these decisions as far as what the team is going to look like next to their crown jewels. And I think he fully understands that and wants to do an A+ job this summer.
You mentioned Paul Reed. I'm glad you did, because I had forgotten. He did mention Paul Reed and Ricky Council. Those guys, Ricky Council signed that. They converted his contract, signed him to a fully an NBA contract. He was on the 2-way, so he could be eligible in the postseason. And then Paul Reed, he has that. It's a non-guaranteed deal now because of them losing in the first round. The number one thing that when you talk to people, and I know you hear it all the time, I see all the comments on all of your articles too. It's like, what about, and Daryl Morey addressed it. They have to address the non-Embiid minutes. Now, it's such a thing here in Philadelphia that normally it's like, all right, if he's healthy, you're planning for a guy for 12, 13 minutes a game. But in reality, that's not what it is. You're planning for a guy 12, 13 games a season, maybe, 20 games a season. In this case, 50 games this season, 40. So it's interesting when you talk about the backup center, it's such a hot button topic here. We might as well be talking about goalies for the Flyers or linebackers for the Eagles. It's backup center. And Paul Reed is a guy that, for right or for wrong, just wasn't it. I don't know if it was that he's, you want to move him to the 4, or if he's a guy that just isn't the style wise that you need from him. It's confusing to me because he's shown flashes, and he was offered that contract last year, I believe it was from the Jazz, and the Sixers were able to swoop in and match it. And so you have him here. He is a viable NBA player. I'm not saying that, but I'm wondering how viable it is for him to be here, because when you look at the style of play they have with Joel Embiid, when he's in, it's completely different. And that's going to be true for a lot of people. I'm not saying you're going to try to find another Joel Embiid out there. They don't exist. Do you need to find a guy that's closer to the style of Joel Embiid? So when he is off the court, whether it's for 10, 12 minutes a game or for its 10, 12 games a season, or do you have to just go find the best guy available that's going to crash the boards and get you those easy putbacks, more of a traditional center, I know everybody, like an Andre Drummond, or do you find somebody that's a hybrid like Joel Embiid? Like, how do you answer that? Because there is such a fall off. You're looking at, minus 44s and minus 36s and minus 41s when Joel Embiid is off. For a playoff series, that just can't happen.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated. I think there are multiple valid ways to approach it. I think it was unfortunate that this series, like Mitchell Robinson, faced off against Paul Reed a lot of the time. That's just a really hard matchup for him. And, if the Sixers had faced another opponent, I imagine he would have looked a little better. I think also a lot of it's just, the lineup as a whole, besides the center, there need to be better solutions. And some of that's on the coaching too, but some of it's also, someone like Tobias Harris in this series is giving you very, very little when you're looking for someone to just create a shot and make it late in the clock. I think, though, there does need to be some thought about this question. Daryl Morey said, we place around 90% of our energy on thinking about what does our team look like when Joel Embiid is healthy. And I understand that point of view, but I think you're absolutely nailing it, that it's not just, well, what's the Sixers record going to be, when Embiid's out with the regular season injury. They need to at least tread water better when he is sitting on the bench in the playoffs. And we saw, like, Nick Nurse tried to play him an entire half, and Embiid faded badly in that game and was ineffective, and the Sixers lost it late. So, I think, there's just better team basketball when Embiid is off the court needs to be the priority. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like as far as the backup center. I do think Paul Reed has some qualities that fit nicely with the way Nick Nurse likes to play. I think it's important that he forces turnovers and brings energy and plays hard and offensive rebounds at a high level. I think for me, it's not like Paul Reed is someone who cannot be part of the future here whatsoever. But I think regardless, there needs to be better answers when Joel Embiid is on the bench, and certainly possible that one of them is just a more traditional, strong rebounding backup center who can give you some dependable minutes, a la Andre Drummond or someone in that kind of mold.
Yeah, I know in future podcasts, we'll start kind of diving deeper into who might be available, as far as free agents, unrestricted free agents versus restricted free agents via trade. There's a lot of things coming out there. We have coming up next month, LeBron James will let the world know if he's coming back. And then whatever that happens that day, that'll be a fun podcast. Also, I will say this now, if LeBron James comes here, I will be completely ridiculous at all times on pregame, postgame, on this podcast. I would be out of pocket. You would not be able to take me anywhere, Noah. So whether that happens or not, just be prepared. Okay, I just want you to be prepared. I will be completely ridiculous because I love LeBron.
He'll be 40 years old right next NBA season. It's he is.
Have you ever seen anybody have the length of the prime that he's had?
Not in professional basketball. No. Maybe maybe in a sport like, golf, someone who's
tennis
40,
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
golf. That's a good one.
Yeah, but professional basketball, he's still up there, and he is still, every move he makes is still rightly everyone's abuzz about it. So we will see what is next for him.
We will see. So there's a lot of names to talk about, but it'll be interesting because I was looking at the list and I was like, well, we probably can't dive into that because it's still so new and there's teams that are still playing, but there's a lot of the types of players and there's names that are coming up. I know we're going to talk about Paul George coming up in the coming weeks. I know we're going to talk about other guys that are out there as far as I think OG Anunoby is an interesting one. Ben Barry, who our producer sitting out there says in the chat, Klay Thompson, he quickly followed that with LOL because that's an LOL. Talk about an aging guy that's on the tail end. But there's some names out there. And one, I thought you brought up a great point. Maybe the answer is, a more traditional center, but also to support that cast. We thought the bench was better. DeAnthony Melton is a player I was so disappointed because he is a guy that you can rely on to be a lot of things. What his nickname was, Mr. Do Something when he was in Memphis. And he showed that here to have this lingering back issue. He says he's not going to need surgery. If there was a way that you could look into the future and see him as a healthy guy next season, is that a player? Because he might be able to come stay here on a kind of show me type of deal. He's a player that would come off the bench and provide, instant defense, some reliable scoring, and a good, spark. Agreed.
No, I mean, I think, if his value unfortunately plummets and it's viable to bring him back, I like the sound of it. I think the high volume 3-point shooting is really important. I think the Sixers still need to get better, which is remarkable that we're still saying that about a team coached by Daryl Morey, that they need to put up more threes, but it's true. And DeAnthony Melton does that. I think he showed some progress this year as a ball handler and playmaker early in the season. I think he loves playing next to Tyrese Maxey, and they have a strong relationship on and off the court. I think he helps their pace, which is often important in those Embiid-less lineups. Those teams need to play often and well in transition, and he does that. So, yeah, it was a real bummer for him how this season played out. I think, though, any team that's signing him would like to have some level of confidence that he's got this figured out and he's capable of staying healthy. And, boy, I mean, I think even if things go well for the next month or two, it would be hard to feel great about his future health-wise. He just made so many efforts to come back, and they kept getting derailed, and it just was such a lingering problem with this lumbar spine injury. But no, I agree. Like on paper, healthy DeAnthony Melton, still a guy that makes a lot of sense for this team, and just broadly speaking, is a really high-level role player in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, he's just 25 years of age. I think people forget that. He's been in the league for a while. It was only 1 year in college. So I think people don't realize how young he is. He doesn't turn 26 until later this year. So that'll be interesting going forward. There's a couple of players. There's an idea of thought, and then we'll kind of close out on this. Daryl Morey has run it back with some of the guys that he knew. We've seen a number of Rockets come through there. What about the idea of running it back, so to speak, with some of the Raptors? Because OG Anunoby was a player that I think a lot of people thought would fit well here. The Knicks swooped in well before the trade deadline and Raptors were in fire sale mode. They got him. And then you look at a guy like Pascal Siakam, who would probably garner the max. So that would be an interesting one. But you've got guys that Nick Nurse would be familiar with as far as running what he wants to. Is there any idea that you could put in credence with that?
I would be really surprised if the Sixers were to get either of those guys. I guess you can't rule anything out. But yeah, just broadly speaking, things didn't end on the sweetest of terms for Nick Nurse in Toronto. And I think it seemed like everyone kind of had enough of each other when the Raptors let him go. And of course, those two players you mentioned are still currently playing in the postseason and enjoying life with their new teams. So I think the Knicks clearly value OG Anunoby at an immense level for very good reason. And him sticking there long term seems like it would make a lot of sense. And I mean, we can't rule anything out, but I think those two guys specifically, at least sitting here right now, would surprise me as Sixers options. I think Paul George, there has been a lot of credible buzz about the Sixers having interest in him, and I think that will continue to be a name to have on the monitor. And then, of course, Jimmy Butler does not seem like everything is rosy there in Miami. So that does seem increasingly valid that he might not be a member of the Heat culture moving forward, and that perhaps he reunites with good friend Joel Embiid. Does not seem like something we can rule out quite yet. But yeah, if we're talking about stars or star-ish players, I think the former Raptors, to me right now, don't seem like guys who I would envision in Philadelphia.
Yeah, they have OG Anunoby, and then I think he has a player option, and then Isaiah Hartenstein is an unrestricted free agent. But I imagine his playoff series, I would think that the Knicks are going to extend him some kind of offer. If they talk about continuity, they're going to be the team to be reckoned with for a while, because they've locked up a lot of those guys, and there's a lot of blueprint you can take away from that. Because I think
Isaiah Hartenstein, credit to Daryl Morey, drafted by Daryl Morey. Boy, he's become a heck of a player, former RGV guy. So
did not know that. Did not know he was a former RGV guy. Rio Grande Vipers.
Rio Grande Valley Vipers. And the Sixers have a bunch of connections there and strong G League org. But to your point, that's a team that's going to have a lot of its core pieces together moving forward, that loves what it's built as far as a strong identity. And the Sixers will do their best to kind of get up there into the elite tier of the Eastern Conference. But Hartenstein is not going to be a viable center.
No.
I think he's above the caliber of player that the Sixers will be able to potentially add behind Joel Embiid for sure.
Yeah, it's a hard sell. Hey, do you want to come here and maybe play, like, I don't know, if Joel Embiid goes out or when he's on the bench? Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Never mind, guy. I do want to say, Ben, I see your comment. Ben Barry chiming in saying, bring Tobias back. Obviously, Ben's got a lot of jokes today. We're not here in a joking mood unless we're joking about LeBron James coming here. So we've got no time for you, Ben Barry. But we're going to get into, I know in the coming podcast, some of the other players that could be available, making up the bench as well as the starters, and also what you do with Tyrese Maxey. Maybe I'll get it before we sign off real quick. So going forward, Tyrese Maxey off guard. Tyrese Maxey, James Harden leaves. Tyrese Maxey point guard. Kyle Lowry comes in. He starts. Tyrese Maxey off guard. When formulating this team, do you take into account of what you want to buy, like Tyrese Maxey to do? Do you look at him and say, all right, I want you to be the off guard. I want you to be able to play both. Do you look for another guy that can play both? Because that's interesting to me, because you could go out and get a more traditional point guard, or you could get a combo guard and put them both back there. I don't know what to do with that. I'm at a crossroads.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly where my mind first goes, just thinking about what kind of guards you want on this team, like someone who can be sturdy defensively in the playoffs and stay on the floor. And I think Kyle Lowry's continued ability to do that was a huge plus, and the fact that he can guard up despite being 6 feet tall. Some defensive versatility, I think, generally is great in the postseason, but especially with Nick Nurse, someone who's going to demand, a pretty high defensive level. I think that's so important. As far as Tyrese Maxey's position, I think he gave you a lot of reasons for optimism this year that he can do well both on and off the ball. I think there's still room to grow in both areas. Mm-hmm. I think polishing, his decision making and figuring out when he can be a little more risky, a little more aggressive, a little more pace pushing. I know Nick Nurse, said to me that's still an area where he thinks Maxey can improve a good amount. And then I think off the ball, like he has some comfort there, but there's still room to expand the ways they can use him, flying around screens. And I think make, a little more of the fact that teams have to respect the threat he poses as a shooter. I think bottom line, like none of that should be really limiting for the Sixers. Like if there's a good guard who, is happy to come to Philadelphia at a good price, I think that's generally going to be a thumbs up, provided they're able to hold their own defensively, and do some of the other things Nick Nurse likes on his team, make good decisions, don't turn the ball over a lot, and mesh well next to star talent. But I think honestly, Maxey's ascent just gives the Sixers a lot more flexibility. I think he can do so many things at such a high level now that there's a lot of players that theoretically sounds like they'd be great next to him and Joel Embiid.
Plenty to get to. It's going to be a fun offseason, pretty much a blank slate, save those two guys, those two superstars, and Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And I know we're going to be talking about it much more. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. For Noah Levick, I'm Amy Fadool. We will see you next time.